Thank you. I'm really honored to be here at the synagogue tonight. It was evening and it was morning, those days of November 9th and 10th, Kristallnacht, which really sounds beautiful, the night of glass, but it was far from beautiful. And I'm here to tell you the story of my father, who was born in a small village called Niederstetten in southern Germany. And like Dr. Stieg's family, had lived in Germany for many hundreds of years, and life was good before Hitler came to power. And I'd like to start with a poem called Summer Afternoon, 1934. There was a camp, my father tells me, about 3 kilometers from our town where young men lived, part of Arbeitsdienst, the National Labor Service, constructing bridges and flood control dikes. About 100 men marched by our house on the way back to the camp in their uniforms, carrying spades, singing, "Wenn das Judenblut von dem Messer spritzt," when the Jewish blood sprays from the knife, dann geht's nochmals so gut, it will be much better. Uncle Max and I watched them march by. They can't do more than kill us, Uncle Max said. Town Hall. It's another poem about Kristallnacht, or also my father was ordered to report to Town Hall. What for? My father asked. What did I do? I'm only 16. And the gendarme told him if he didn't like it, if he asked any more questions, he could go home. They'd arrest his father instead. And he saw his father paying his tax bill in the next room. And he didn't call out, afraid they'd arrest him too, afraid his father would want to take his place. And the gendarme said he had a job to do, a quota of 10 men, and he didn't care how he filled it. And my father knew the gendarme, went to school with his daughter. He was told to empty his pockets, turn in any money and weapons, and he turned in his pocket knife, and told the gendarme he had to go to the bathroom. And another gendarme, Wilhelm, took him, and he knew Wilhelm too. He told Wilhelm not to worry, he wasn't going to run away, and Wilhelm said he knew, but was just doing his job. As my father and 9 men were loaded on a truck that said drink Coca-Cola, he turned and saw Wilhelm crying like a child. Breaking laws. Kristallnacht, broken glass. Nazis arrest him, a boy 16 years old. Dachau, November 1938. A striped cotton uniform. It's almost winter. He shares a bunk with a man in his 50s who freezes to death one night. The next morning, a capo tells him, take off the man's long underwear, do it quickly, before the SS come for the body. You will freeze at night too, if you don't. It is the custom of some Jews not to wear clothes from a dead body, and to save one's life, the rabbis teach one must break custom. He washes the underwear that night, places it over a chair, next to a wood stove to dry, sleeps on it, still damp, to make sure no one will steal it. If you were lucky, you got a hat, my father said. Told to strip, he stood in line, got examined by an SS doctor for skin diseases and bruises, told to go, then got beaten by an SS guard, stood in line to get a blue and white striped cotton jacket and pants, yellow triangles stenciled on each, leather shoes with no linings, a pair of cotton socks, 2 patches with numbers, a cotton blue and white striped hat, was marched to his barracks, given a needle and thread, was told to sew one patch on his shirt, the other on his pants, and pass the needle to the next man. And each morning was marched out to line up between the barracks at 4 o'clock, was counted, stood until the capos marched him to the Appellplatz for roll call, stood at attention for hours, was told by the commandant to put his hand on his head, take off his hat at the commandant's command, slap it down against his thigh. Thousands of us, my father said, sounded like a cannon shot. Testing ground. And my father told me he was sent into a room with high ceilings. He was told to sit with his legs wide open. The next man told to sit inside his legs, and the next, and the next. He sat until the SS finished counting how many would fit in a room. It was 8,000. A good job. 1. I'd shine their shoes at night and put them under their beds so they'd pick me, my father says. I was in Baraka 18, Stube 1. Almost 2,000 men in each Stube, racks of bunks. When the bunks were full, straw mattresses on the floor. If the capos picked me to sweep, wash, and polish the floors, I wouldn't have to stand out in the cold. Each morning at 4 o'clock, we were marched outside. We sang songs for hours in the cold. The songs were taped, played on the radio to show how happy, how well taken care of we were. An SF officer would come into the barracks, check my work, and I stood at attention, took off my hat, did not speak unless spoken to. Sometimes he told me to continue and left. 2. I'd volunteer to be a Kostträger, a food carrier. While the others waited in the roll call line, 3 of us carried 2 cast iron buckets, enough to hold vegetable soup for 1,000 men. 2 would hold the handles on the outside. I was in the middle, holding the handles on the insides. A capo marched us 1/2 mile from the kitchen to the space between the barracks, where army bread, Kommissbrot, was piled up like bricks on the tables where we ate. The capo said Kirchheimer is the best Kostträger we have. Some men wouldn't eat the soup, saying it wasn't kosher, but I ate it. I knew they wouldn't put any meat in it. One night, a man went crazy in the barracks. We told him to stop, my father said. We told him the SS would take him. We tried to stop his screaming, his flailing arms. The capos heard him, came and tried to restrain him. They took him into the latrine, put his head under water. They couldn't stop his screaming, his flailing arms. They called from capo to capo, from barracks to barracks, until it reached SS headquarters. The SS came, took him outside. We heard the hoses turned on him, then a shot. Then we went to sleep. Release from Dachau. I had a dream last night, my father tells me. He dreamed the capos woke him up at 4 o'clock in the morning on Friday, December 23rd, 1938, made him strip out of his uniform, made him wait in a line for an SS doctor to examine him for bruises and frostbite, made him listen to speeches by the SS warning him to get out of Germany and never return. They warned him if he didn't, he'd be sent back to Dachau and never leave. He dreamed he was assigned a place in another line, waited to return his uniform and get his own clothes, shoes, and coat, and that the SS drove him to an area about 4 miles from the Munich train station, then made him march the rest of the way. The sky was so black he couldn't see the man who gave him a ticket. It took 12 hours, and he changed trains twice. He had no money, no food. The train arrived on Shabbos morning, and he didn't want to see another person's face, and took the back way home through the fields, crossing railroad tracks, careful not to get caught in the track switches. His father was the first person to see him as he opened the shutters he closed each night so no one could throw rocks into the house. He went through the front gate into the house, saw his mother had baked challahs and ate an entire one. He went to sleep at 11 o'clock in the morning and slept to the next day. That's exactly how it happened, my father tells me. That's how I got home. Can you believe I still dream about it 60 years later? Getting a visa. The doctors made me strip, my father said, listened to my heart and lungs, made me walk down the hall to see if I limped, sent me to another room where I waited while others were called, watched as each raised his right hand, as each received a piece of paper. My name was called, I stood up, raised my hand, answered "Ya." The man laughed at me. I didn't understand what he said, but he gave me that piece of paper. Visa, U.S. Consulate, Stuttgart, a red ribbon attached to the corner. I heard teenagers in America wore white shoes in summer. I went to a shoe store. I wanted to be in style. If school kids hadn't backed my mother, 6 years old at the time, against a wall, thrown rocks at her and called her Yuda, my aunt hadn't escaped and worked as a maid to make enough money to get my mother out of Germany, my mother hadn't had to live in an orphanage in Amsterdam and wait until my grandparents could get immigration visas. My mother hadn't had to return to Germany to get her visas for America. My father hadn't had to leave his home and family to immigrate to America. The United States government hadn't had immigration quotas. The United States hadn't made him, a 17-year-old, fill out affidavit after affidavit after affidavit. The Nazis hadn't invaded Holland one day before his father and sister were to leave for America. The boat they were supposed to be on hadn't been bombed in the harbor. They hadn't been sent to the left instead of the right. Life didn't depend on if.